Welcome everyone to the event show live today. Fantastic to have you all join us. Thank you to those that are joining us for the first time, and also of course thanks to you that have been supporting the show across the last couple of months. And the purpose of this show really is to give a voice to our industry and bring us together and hear from some of the influential leaders of our industry to get some insights and some inspiration for what's been obviously a challenging period. I think we've all seen in recent weeks, we're starting to re-emerge from the shutdown, and some really positive stories coming out. And really that's the theme for today's show, is to celebrate some of the success stories of the past, and look at what is re-emerging and developing. Also recognizing that the challenges we still face, but looking for good insights and information to understand what that roadmap might look like. So my name is Andrew O'Loughlin. I help people design and rebuild event experiences, and also help event people have more success in our industry and navigate their way through their industry. I've got a fantastic panel again today, and I'll introduce them very shortly. I do like to call out, if you've got questions of the panel today, please do drop them in the Q&A box. Feel free to chat in the chat box. Please do drop your thoughts in there. It's really important for us to understand where your heads are at and what questions you might have. So I know we've got a really great audience that tunes in, so really keen to hear from you, and we'll get to your questions obviously as we go. So I will jump into it. We've got a fantastic panel today. To introduce them, we have Tim Oberg, who's previously the CEO at Parkrun, moved into a new role at Parkrun. So welcome, Tim.
Thanks, Andrew. Great to be here.
Great to have you on the show, Tim. We also have Steve Whately, who's director at Nielsen Sports. Good morning, Steve.
Morning, Andrew. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the chat.
Excellent. No, great to have you on the show. And we also have Professor Hans Westerbeek. Hans is the head of international sport business at Victoria University, and also heads up the Sport Business Insight Group. So welcome and good morning, Hans.
Good morning, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Excellent, guys. Okay, so I'm going to go to you first up, Tim. Really interested in hearing the story of Parkrun. We know it's a great success story of sort of reasonably recent times, I guess. But like all of us, naturally were shut down. But you seem to be one of the sort of the first to be re-emerging and getting your events back up and running. So we'd love to hear a little bit about your role, Tim, a little bit about Parkrun for those that aren't familiar with it, and what you've been sort of working through in the last couple of months.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andrew. So yeah, so Parkrun, we are a global organisation. We're in 22 countries. I oversee the APAC region, so Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Singapore, Malaysia. And we put on free 5-kilometre runs and walks in parks all over the country, and it's all run by very dedicated teams of volunteers. So we've got a small staff, but a huge volunteer community. So I got involved in 2011. Excuse me for a moment there. 2011, I brought Parkrun to the UK, to Australia from the UK, and it's been up and up ever since, as you kind of say. Forward to now, and I guess we had our first inkling something was going down in terms of coronavirus in about February. We were forced to cancel our events in Singapore for a couple of weeks. So I think there was an early spread, if you want to call it that, of coronavirus into Singapore. The government brought in some changes to group sizes that could meet, which meant that for a couple of weeks there in February, we had to shut things down. So that kind of, I guess, caught our attention, shall we say, but I don't think any of us saw or foresaw what was coming. We actually started up again. So there was a couple of weeks in February we had to shut down. We were then actually able to open again in Singapore. But then as we all know, the first couple of weeks in March is when the mayhem really started. So by mid-March, we'd closed Parkrun globally. We didn't close it all at once. Our position right from the start was that we would follow the country guidance in each country that we were in. So effectively what that meant was over the sort of the first week, we shut down about half of our countries. And then in the second week, the other half went. And it was in the second week that our largest countries, which were Australia, South Africa, and the UK, they all went in that second week. So it's been a really challenging, but also really interesting, and in some ways actually really positive experience for us, in that once we, I guess, had that initial shock of having to shut down the organisation and manage that process, we've been able to, I guess, regroup, focus on a number of priorities that we probably otherwise wouldn't have had a chance to do. And I said to the team right at the start, I said, I think our one goal here is to come out of this better than when we went in. And that could mean anything, you know, better could be defined as lots of different things. But for us, it's given us a real opportunity to focus on our people. So from terms of our internal staff, so we've got about 40 staff globally. So we've really connected in ways with each other that we had never done before. So I'm now regularly on calls with colleagues of mine in the UK who I'd only ever spoken to at an annual social event, it might be. But now I'm on weekly calls with them, checking in, hearing what they're up to, understanding them, understanding their work. Our team here in Australia, we're now talking every single day, whereas, you know, I would have colleagues even on the team here who I wouldn't necessarily speak to, even maybe some weeks. I'm like, you know, a week might go past and I haven't spoken to someone. So we're connected as a team much better, I think, than we were before. We've also invested a huge amount of time in supporting our volunteers. So we've got about 390 parkrun locations here in Australia, about 2,000 around the world. And we made a commitment right at the start that we were going to telephone personally every single event director who wanted a call. We didn't force ourselves on people if they didn't want to call. But we ended up making over 1,000 phone calls and speaking directly to our event directors. And, you know, we'd never done that before. That took the whole team of 40 staff weeks to get through everybody. But we spoke to everybody. We listened. We heard their stories. For some people, they were cruising. It was like they were just on a big holiday. But for other people, you know, we've got people in the UK who are NHS nurses who are working 20-hour days on the front line, fearful of death, you know, as they go, of catching coronavirus themselves. So we've had the whole gamut of experiences from our people. So we've invested a whole heap of time in supporting our teams, even though the actual events aren't running, but in supporting them through this and really giving them kind of whatever they need, be it a shoulder to cry on, or some words of encouragement, or even just leaving them alone to just enjoy some time off, so to speak. And then we've had a number of internal projects that we're working on as well. Development of our website. We've really enhanced our social media presence during this time. We've been experimenting with different platforms, you know, Instagram lives and things like this that we'd never done before. So, you know, we're definitely going to come out of this better, I think, better equipped than we were when we went in. And we've got the first inkling of that this week because we relaunch in New Zealand this Saturday. So it's been 15 weeks since the world has had a parkrun anywhere, and New Zealand relaunched this week. So we're really, really excited. Obviously, New Zealand lifted all of their restrictions about 3.5 weeks ago. So it has taken us a few weeks to just get everything lined up and ready to go. But you know, the parkrun world will be watching this Saturday, 8 a.m. in New Zealand, 6 a.m. Australian time, when we relaunch in New Zealand. We're live streaming from one of our events so that people can, who want to, can check it out. And the big question for us, and I think this was probably something we're all going to talk about today, who's going to come back? You know, how many people are going to come back? And it's an unknown, but we've done some intentions surveying of our New Zealand parkrunners, and 98% say they are going to come back either on the first weekend or very early on. and about 70% say they're going to come back and volunteer. So really positive signs for us. As I say, we'll see what happens this Saturday. If everyone turns up at once, it's going to be pretty interesting. But we're really, really excited because it is that first sign of light from what has been a pretty dark time.
Yeah, fantastic. I think it's a brilliant story, Tim, in terms of what parkrun's achieved globally across 22 countries and the scale, but also the way that the events have been rolled out, and I guess you talked about the volunteer network that's allowed this event to become what it has, and it's really great to see it re-emerging, that light at the end of the tunnel, as you say. I think it's fantastic.
Thanks.
And I think it is interesting that you've been speaking, with your event coordinators, event managers, to reach out and understand what they're going through. And it seems to be a sort of a symbol of the culture of parkrun to connect with people, certainly behind the scenes, and then with the wider world as well. So really interesting that you did go out and ask your participants how they're feeling about coming back as well. And I think that's obviously a good thing to be doing, and something that we should all be looking to do if we aren't already. I'll actually bring Steve in, because it does tie in quite nicely, so I guess, to what Steve obviously does in his work. And Steve, perhaps you can give us a quick rundown of your work at Nielsen Sports, and some of the communication, I guess, some of the research that you've been conducting with our markets in recent times.
Yeah, sure, Andrew. Well, I think just to sort of summarise, I guess in a nutshell, so we're an independent provider of data and insights to the sports and major events industry. Essentially, we just help all parties make better commercial decisions. So that's, I guess, your sort of elevator pitch. And then to expand on that, we work with sporting bodies, we work with sponsors of sport, government, being tourism bodies or Sport Australia, state sport and rec bodies, broadcasters, media agencies, talent agencies. So yeah, really every I guess corner of the sector. But then regarding events specifically, we deliver attendee insights for a number of events. Obviously domestically, internationally. I'll just talk more about domestically at the moment, but things like the Australian Open, the Grand Prix, and then domestic competitions like Suncorp Super Netball. We're delivering attendee insights for all those event owners, and I guess essentially the insights that we deliver for parties, for those parties are really based around sort of two key purposes, and the first being understanding the attendee experience. So, for example, which elements of the event experience are actually driving customer satisfaction, and how does that event perform against those elements? And secondly, understanding how sponsor activations perform at the event. So, for example, were attendees actually aware of the activations? Did they engage with those activations? But then, were they successful in actually changing the way that the attendees felt about that brand? So they're probably the two sort of main purposes of those attendee insights. We also do some other interesting stuff around major events, economic impact research. So we do that work specifically for the event owners, or sometimes directly for the government. And essentially that's all about helping government understand their ROI. So obviously they invest in bringing events to different regions, and our research on those events can also tell them, what was the visitor expenditure in that region, which is directly attributable to hosting the event. So that's a bit of a summary about I guess who we are and what we do in the space. Do you want me to sort of expand on that in terms of some of the that
would be great, Steve. I think I think it's obviously an important area for us to be looking into in terms of understanding the marketplace and our audience, and as it should always be. But of course, right now, in terms of understanding what's going through people's minds and what those elements of value will be, and what influence we might have. So yeah, I'd love to hear anything you can share with us this morning.
Yeah, well, I think the things that I think generally are probably two parts to it. Sort of, I guess, just generally, what are the things that people should be thinking about, and then whether it's now or later in the chat, I can sort of talk more specifically to some of the stuff that's more relevant to the current COVID situation as well. So I think first off, in terms of things to think about, and the first one, Andrew, we've had a good chat about in the past before actually, which is, you know, making sure you're designing the events to meet the needs of your actual target audience. And too often, you know, event owners aren't looking at, you know, key demographic cuts of data, either right up front in the design stage of an event, or, you know, or actually at the evaluation stage. So really kind of going through that process of knowing who is your target audience, understanding their needs, designing accordingly, and then testing for success at the end. And, you know, that might sound simple, but there's a lot of people that aren't going through that process. Second, I'd probably say, you know, festivalization is a bit of a trend, you know, that we talk about. It's probably the major, one of the major trends around sporting events around the world. And that's obviously about expanding on the core product. You know, the AO is held up as being a great example of that in terms of the stuff that they've done with their focus on with kids, music and food, expanding on the core sort of tennis tournament. But it's probably challenging people to think more about that. So, you know, what's actually working and what's not working around that festivalization. I won't say that again. We've seen a lot of things tried with, you know, different levels of success, and there's no doubt that it's a big trend for a reason, because when you get it right, it can be really effective. But probably just, I guess, challenging people to think about, are there some, you know, less sexy things that you can do that are potentially more cost effective that will actually have a bigger impact on customer satisfaction? And, you know, I think one really good example of that is, you know, the Australian Open invested in bringing a whole lot more shade to their massive sort of outside precinct. You know, that seems, I think you'll agree, you know, not a very sexy thing compared to, you know, the AO live stage that they've done, and, you know, bringing in, you know, Melbourne's best restaurants. But in terms of the impact on customer satisfaction, you know, I think that was really, really good bang for buck. So that's probably another one. Do you want to keep going, Andrew?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think just to your point there, I think it's really good to call out, and certainly what I've understood from speaking to a lot of event leaders is understanding the different elements of value, I guess, and you know, sometimes those fundamental needs are the best place to start, and particularly when perhaps budgets are tight and resources are limited, that's a good place to be looking for improvements in that event experience, isn't it? And we need those aspirational moments and elements, and we need the cool stuff, but also it's interesting insight that that's also what people need and what they value as well.
Yeah, well, that actually ties into the next point I was going to make, Andrew, which is really around, so not just understanding, you know, of all the elements, you know, which ones is satisfaction, you know, perhaps low for. It's sort of a combination of which elements are actually driving satisfaction. Like too often someone can look at something and say, we're not performing well on that, but without actually understanding, is that something that's driving satisfaction? You can end up investing all this time and money into improving satisfaction results for an element of the experience that really doesn't drive customer satisfaction anyway. So something that you could potentially just, you know, leave as it is and spend your time somewhere else. So it's actually understanding those key satisfaction drivers before you go into looking at what you want to improve is a key point. And then probably finally, just, not just focusing on attendees. Like a lot of time people do commit to spending the time and the money to do, you know, research and get insights. They do it on the event attendees, but what about those people that are actually interested in that core product that aren't actually attending? Why aren't they attending? What are the barriers to attendance? And that's often left out. And so you end up continuing to make changes and design changes for the people that are already going to the event. But what about the people on the fringes that you want to get into the event? You need to obviously understand more about them if you want to bring them inside the tent.
Yeah, again, I think it's a really good point, Steve. I think that understanding the relationship that the different segments of your audience have with your event, I think is really critical at any time. Whether they're the advocates, the fanatics of your sport or event, or whether they are the more fickle fans or those that are even alienated. I think, you know, it's how we bring them into on the pathway, isn't it? And I think now more than ever that we need to understand the relationship people have with our events, it may be, and I'll probably come back to you on this, but are people that are more connected to a sport and event more likely to come back sooner, and is it those that potentially have less of a strong sort of relationship and tradition or lifestyle with that sport? Are they sort of going to perhaps wait a bit longer to see whether it's a good time to join back in? But I'll come back to you for some more thoughts. I'll bring Hans in now, actually, and Hans, I know you have a lot to offer in terms of what we're discussing. I guess the re-emergence of sport and events throughout sport, and I know you've shared some really interesting thoughts and some research that you've been conducting around. I think it was more focused on community sport, but it'd be fascinating to hear a bit about what that sort of uncovered for you and what you can share with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I think what I can contribute and what we've been working on sits neatly between, what Tim and Steve were talking about. Hardcore, volunteer-driven participation in what is community-based sport activity, but in a non-competitive club organized sense. And then the other side, where we look at these massive, big spectator sport type of events that, basically require attendees for them to be successful. And we're finding all kinds of ways to overcome some of those limitations. And then you have this hardcore of community sport in the middle. In our Sport Business Insights group, our focus almost by default is on that community sport participation insights perspective. And it's based around a couple of projects that we have been running for a long time. One is called Sport and Recreation Spatial, which is a Victorian-based annual monitoring of sport participation in 12 sports. We collect through collaboration with Vic Health and Sport and Recreation Victoria about 1 million participation records across those 12 sports every year. And we've been doing that for 7 or 8 years. Rochelle Imey is Professor Rochelle Imey from Fed Uni and Vic Uni, a joint appointment, is leading that project. And has given us tremendous insights pre-COVID in terms of participation trends in different sports, reasons why people drop off, great insights into the massive drop-off rates at certain points in time in terms of age and gender, type of sport, you name it, which has provided us with an amazing foundation to a project that we very quickly initiated when the crisis hit. We call it sport health and well-being pre, during, and post-COVID. We worked together with Flinders Uni, Fed Uni, and Vic Uni to put together a project where we asked people about their physical activity and sport behavior pre-COVID. So basically do a zero measurements type of insight. Ask them how they participated in sport, but also about their mental well-being, say a year ago compared to now. And we are going to, and we've invited those who want to be surveyed again at a point in time when we can say that participation in sport has started again in a way that was normal pre-COVID, if that ever happens. And of course, we all put our trust in science here to get a vaccine sooner or later. Anyway, the point is a short snapshot of results. We collected within a couple of weeks over 6,000 responses, a majority from actual sport participants, but also from some people who weren't active in a sporting club. And the results are quite sobering in that over 30% felt that they were in a lesser place now mentally in terms of their mental health than they were a year ago. Their physical activity levels have obviously significantly dropped, and people felt, stressed and anxious about that. And we combined some of those insights with Patrick Walker is the CEO of the Australian Sports Foundation. They conducted some research themselves within sporting clubs, and they're going to launch their report soon, I believe, within weeks. But some of the results that Patrick shared with us were even more sobering, in that a high percentage of clubs feel that they, if they can't resume their competition soon, will have to fold, because they will financially not be able to cover the cost of simple operation, ground maintenance, electricity, water, gas type of stuff, pure basic maintenance of basic operations. And also, and this goes to Tim's point about how many of the volunteers are returning, an anticipated drop in direct volunteer support to those community clubs. So, and some of these insights we produced about 2 weeks ago. Then, of course, the Victorian part lockdown hit, and some competitions that we're going to run are now, either put on hold, cancelled, or limited in scope in terms of which suburbs they can and can't run. So I guess, I'm a perennial optimist, and some of the comments I put out there in media land were that I believe the demand for sport, participation sport in particular, will increase post-COVID or in the recovery phase. And events like parkrun, for example, are probably in a better place to provide for that increase in demand, because they can be quicker on their feet in terms of up and running. Whereas club-based sport, being stuck to cycles of competition, seasonal, social distancing issues, close contact type sports, team-based sports, volunteer dependency within a club environment rather than, across those big events like parkrun. So, that's the space that I've been working in for the last 2 or 3 months. So from our regular work to monitoring and identifying trends in participation in sport, to crisis, never waste a good crisis, but also be aware of what a terrible crisis like this can do.
I think it's really interesting, Hans, that it does highlight, the research does highlight, I guess, what we've believed, and that's the role that sport plays in influencing and positively influencing people's lifestyles, and when that's taken away. And I'm a big believer in, and have done some research, I guess, to support the fact that events are the catalyst, the platform, I guess, for the delivery of sport or and entertainment and other fields. The events are a great way to influence that behaviour and attitude and whichever way we sort of desire. So I think, parkrun, I think, and Tim, we might come back to you for your thoughts, but to me, parkrun has been recognised, I think, as a great intervention, if you like, in terms of in people's lifestyles, to for them to come together and be more active and feel connected socially. And I think there's some good research around parkrun, but also it's easy to observe the positive influence these events have in people's lives each weekend in your case. But for other events, I think it's an opportunity for us to use them as milestones in our audience's lifestyles to change the way that they're what they're feeling, what they're doing, and how they're living their lives. So, Tim, can you sort of probably share a little bit about how the positive sort of impact that parkrun's been seen to have across the communities that you're involved with?
Yeah, of course. And look, there's no doubt that the arguably the least important component of parkrun is the running of the 5K. It's everything else that sits around the fact that the 5K is the physical activity, and we are a physical activity intervention. But what people are missing now, what they're missing the most and have missed over the last 15 weeks is not the 5K run. It's coming together on a Saturday morning with like-minded people who you see every week, meeting new people who have come for the first time or might be visiting your town, and that social component, that supportive social connection, and that is the big thing that parkrun, no matter whether we're here in Australia, whether we are in Siberia, or wherever we are, where parkrun operates 22 countries, it's about people coming together. And of course, that has what has stopped over the last 4 months is that ability, not just at parkrun, but that ability for people to come together as they did previously, be it, schools or people, in offices, or in our case, coming together at parkrun. So, I think that's what we're most excited about is people being able to reconnect on that sort of physical, personal level. While we've been shut down, we've seen really innovative ways that our park runners have stayed together. We've had a number of events around the world who have been Facebook Living at their usual parkrun start time, even standing at their usual parkrun start positions and talking to their communities through social media, or having coffee catch-ups on Zoom, similar to what we're doing now, and just getting anyone from that local community who wants to have the post-parkrun coffee just without the parkrun. So there's been lots of ways people have stayed together. There's obviously been virtual runs that people have created, and we've recently launched our own version called, believe it or not Parkrun is the name of our thing that people are doing that's not parkrun. But overall, parkrun's not about the run. It's about the people coming together and connecting, and that is certainly what we're looking forward to being able to facilitate in New Zealand as of this weekend, and hopefully in other countries in the not too distant future.
It's great to hear, Tim. I think it's nice to hear that those rituals are being kept in place by the participants and volunteers in your community. I think that's one thing that, as event providers, we really want to make sure that we can retain the connection. Events sometimes only happen once a year, and I think that's something that we all attempt to do, is retain that engagement with our audiences between events. So it's nice when you get to a position that's sort of organic, if you like, and self-fulfilling and user generated. So it's cool.
Andrew, I'll actually share with you, we've got some great examples of event teams who've recreated their Saturday park runs in Lego, and then shared that on their Facebook pages. So I'll send you some links and you can share it with your community here, because as I say, people innovated to stay connected and to lift people's spirits, and there's been some great examples. So yeah, I'll share them with you afterwards.
Brilliant. I love a bit of Lego. I think it'd be really cool to see some of the things which people initiating themselves. We'll share that after the show as well. And I know there's some questions coming through which are being answered by the panel. Thank you. So thanks for sending through your questions, everyone. And there's one there about Steve's point about knowing what elements drive satisfaction. And I guess what elements are important. And I just might ask you, Tim, on this first, and then go to Steve for that answer. I know, Tim, that the parkrun's done very well in terms of focusing on some key moments, I guess, in the journey for participants. And I know, having attended and being involved with parkrun, that when you arrive, that sort of first impression is a key moment, and there's the briefing, and there's sort of the acknowledgement after the run, and the follow-ups between events. So it seems to me there's some really moments of influence, as I like to call them, that parkrun's focused on without trying to do too much, and I guess understanding what creates satisfaction and what moments are important.
Look, one of the most important things for us is that when people first arrive, is that they feel welcome. And we know through our own research, but also through wider research, that the intimidation or the fear of what may occur. I don't have the right workout gear, or I don't have the fancy shoes. There are so many anxieties that go into people actually starting some sort of physical activity, and we've had countless numbers of people write to us talking about how they've sat in their car in the car park for weeks and weeks and weeks in a row, unable to actually get out of their car to come to parkrun for the first time. So for us, one of the most important things is when you just arrive, you feel welcome. And so we have what we call the first timers welcome that happens at every event before the actual main briefing. And effectively, that is really just about saying hello. Obviously, we go through some operational elements, but even if we forget to do that, the most important thing is just to say hi, introduce yourself, and say hello to the new people. Once we get through that sort of, I guess, initial necessity of making people feel welcome, and they actually get into it and they become park runners. We keep them going through little milestones along the way. So if you volunteer 25 times, if you run or walk 50, 100, 250 or 500 times, you join various what we call milestone clubs, and you receive a free t-shirt as part of that. So at any park run, you'll see lots of people either in a purple shirt, a red shirt, a black shirt, a green shirt. These are all the various clubs that people have, or milestone clubs that people have attended. And yeah, we see typically once someone gets to about their 20th park run, they're hooked. Not everyone makes 20 though. And, it's getting them to about 20 is the key for us. But once we get them through about 20, they tend to be pretty hooked, and they hang around and they chase these larger milestones. So yeah, these are things that we've recognised over time, through our own research and just anecdotally, and it does seem to work for us quite well.
Yeah, I think it's a great case study, if you like, for us all to sort of understand some of the touch points, the interactions that are really worth investing your time and energy into, particularly when resources are limited, as they're likely to be for some time. I think understanding what has an impact, and to me, I think as you highlight, Parkrun's done a great job of connecting on those different layers of value in terms of the fundamentals of making people feel welcome, and the emotional elements of reducing the fears, as you talk about, and making people feel good, and that social level, and then that aspirational aspect of progression. And I think it's a fantastic case study that we can all sort of learn from and apply the principles in our events. And I'll come to you, Steve. I'd love to get your thoughts on the question. So for those that couldn't see the question, someone just asked about Steve's point about knowing what elements are driving customer satisfaction, and how can you identify these elements so that you can focus on them as event providers. So Steve, your thoughts on that?
Yep, sure. So it's something called a driver analysis that our research team conducts, and they'd be much better speaking to the technicalities of how they actually go about doing that. But essentially it's all captured through the data that we get from attendee responses when we do our post-event research. And it's really effective in terms of the way it's displayed is a really simple way of visualizing, basically what you should be focusing on. So if you can sort of, I guess, imagine a quadrant where one axis is basically showing you the importance of that element to the event, and the other axis is showing, your performance against that element. And so essentially you end up with a quadrant of some event elements that are very important to driving event satisfaction, and you're performing quite poorly on them, and that very clearly calls out where you should be focusing your time. And then you've got things that are really important for your event satisfaction you're performing really well on, so important you keep an eye on that and continue to maintain high standards. And then equally it calls out things that that aren't that important for driving event satisfaction, and probably something to monitor in future years if that does become more important. But it's a really clear way of helping you map out a strategy for how you get better the next time you run an event.
I think it's brilliant, Steve. I think simple but effective models that we can use, and processes that we can use. I think that's a really strong way of, as you say, identifying what's important. And what are people satisfied with? Sometimes we are investing a lot of time, energy, and money into things which people have told us they don't have a great deal of satisfaction with, and we're trying to improve them. But then if you do ask them, is that important to you? They're not quite so concerned, or even if you remove it, it's not something that's really necessary. So great to explore that and have some evidence behind that. And I think it's a nice process that people can work through. So it's fantastic. Hans, keen to come back to you in terms of thoughts. Your view is across, I guess, participation sport, but also professional sport, and keen to get your thoughts in terms of I suppose a broader view of sport, but particularly events. And I mean, we've seen some good success stories emerge with the FIFA Women's World Cup bid being successful last week, and there's still, of course, a lot of uncertainty about when events and things will resume. But what's your sort of perspective from your vantage point in terms of how the next few months and even couple of years looks?
Yeah, I think the timing of winning the hosting rights for the World Cup in 2023 is perfect. I mean, you couldn't have hoped for a better, call it positive restart of major events, positioning and hosting capability of a country such as Australia, which has built its reputation on its ability to generate that communal sense of passion and amazing operational excellence in hosting major events. So, and it's far enough into the future that we can all hope it will allow us to have full and packed stadiums again, but also give us sufficient preparation time and alternative scenario planning to host it in a way that it remains pandemic safe. Without having to do what's happening right now. I mean, I watched the game yesterday, Carlton and the Saints, and you know, my kids, my 10-year-old was asking, how do they know when to make which sound when, you know, they kick the goal, when they just miss it, when they hit it? And he was already, you know, analyzing the situation where, yeah, that was the perfect crowd noise for kicking a goal or this or that. And it's amazing how quickly you start, you know, observing the different contexts and environments, which I must say, I mean, the crowd noise greatly enhances the TV viewer experience. I do miss, you know, the crowd shots, but it's still a very enjoyable spectacle. So, you know, the FIFA World Cup, amazing. And it ticks a number of boxes, of course. It's the Women's World Cup, not the men's. It continues to highlight the importance of this equality of major sporting competition and the focus that we've given to female professional leagues, which is great as well. I guess the other point that I would love to make, and again in follow up to what Steve and Tim were saying, is that if we continue to understand from a customer perspective that what brings us ultimately together as people who play sport, it is always event or even, like Steve said, festival based. And that goes all the way down to the level of club competition. If we are, you know, naive enough to think that it is about this weekly competition where we travel to other clubs and have this game against other teams, then I guess we're missing the point. What we really should be realizing is that it is about this coming together to engage in activities that, you know, we jointly are passionate about. If club sport misses that point, then what is already happening will continue to happen, and that is that most people will drop off out of club-based competition sport after their 20th birthday. And the reality is most sport and most people in sport will play their sport between 5 and 25, and that's it. And after that, there's still, you know, lots of senior sport activity, but the majority of sports played by young people. So again, I have to, you know, excuse the term, but piss a little bit into Tim's pocket in saying that parkrun is probably one of those examples where this need and demand for sport and creating, you know, lowering the barrier to participation. I love the example of people sitting in their cars feeling anxious or afraid not, you know, to take the next step. And you guys thinking about how you can lower the barrier to that participation in order to pull them in. Because the community club sport finds it very hard to bring in those people who, you know, are later in life in terms of entering physical activity in sport. Community club sport is not attuned to bringing those people in. Whereas event-based sport or event-based non-organized or organized non-competitive sport, event-based activities, perfectly pitched at, and you know, organizations like Nielsen Sport have identified that is what drives people. That is what satisfies people in terms of participating in sport.
I think it's a great point, Hans, and I'm keen to get Tim and Steve's further thoughts on. Obviously, to me, you know, the experience that we provide as a whole is ultimately what it's about, and I think the way we make people feel about the end-to-end experience, if you like, I mean, that's critical. And I think a few of us have talked already today about, it is about the sport and the activity. And I think, we need to recognize that's at the core, but it's also not just about the activity. And there's so much around that along the journey that people have with our events on the day and across a life cycle. I think that's so important to focus on the influence we can have and not just focus in on the field of play. I think that's, or the event activity, look a bit more broadly at the influence we can have.
Can I just add to that, Andrew? That, we've been talking about volunteers a fair bit, and volunteers are prominent in community-based sport, in events like parkrun, but also at all those major events that are the highlight of global spectacles like the AO, the Grand Prix. Massive amounts of volunteers that actually are used to deliver those events. That it would not be possible to pay all of them and create a break-even or surplus generating budget if it wasn't for all of those volunteers. So I guess the other point that we should take from this and where we should improve our ability to continue to service everything from community sport to elite sport is that if we can create an event platform for the volunteers, rather than volunteer and here's your t-shirt and your sausage sizzle, etc. If it becomes an event in itself for the volunteers, create a platform of passion and ability to deliver to satisfy their volunteering needs. And I've seen it in my own soccer club. A few passionate volunteers who happen to be coaches as well have kickstarted the inter and intra club competition. And if for whatever reason Football Victoria or the FFA decide that the soccer competitions are off this season, and a few of those passionate volunteers can connect 2 or 3 clubs and say, look guys, we're in a safe suburb or a postcode. We can continue this season by saying every Sunday we come together, we let our boys and girls play a match against each other. We do it in a COVID-safe way. We continue to train on Tuesday and Thursday. We offer the opportunity for our kids to participate. And at the same time, it also puts our association, state and national association on notice that, yeah, sure, you organize a competition between locations and geographies, but ultimately it's delivered by the volunteers. And without those volunteers, the state and national bodies also have no grunt in delivering what they do.
I think, I'm sure Tim will have a bit to offer, and I think certainly a big believer that the experience, the design of the experience needs to look at all the different people that are involved, and whether that's participants, fans, volunteers, staff, stakeholders. I think we can look at what experience we're providing, on that journey, and how can we positively influence that. As the parkrun example shows, that that network of volunteers makes it what it is. Tim, your thoughts on?
Yeah, so I'm glad you said participants and volunteers, because that's something that we don't say that at parkrun. Everyone's a participant. So if you are a walker and you're going to take 65 minutes to walk 5 kilometers, you're a participant. You're one of us. If you are an Olympic athlete and you want to turn up and run 14.5 minutes, you're a participant. You're one of us. If you only ever want to volunteer, you're a participant. You're one of us, because we view all of that as good for you. So it's all good for your mental health. Obviously there's a different physical benefit to running than there is to walking, than there is to volunteering, but it's all better than being in bed. It's all better than lying in bed and not being out in nature with people. And so we've been really strong, probably particularly in the last 3 years, of really publicly reframing what participation means to parkrun, and more broadly what we think it should mean to all sport and to the community. And that there shouldn't be the participants are here, and the volunteers are here. First of all, it creates this almost like divide between those who play and those who enable it, essentially. You know, we see everyone's as important in the whole family or the whole scheme of things. So our view is that, you know, volunteering is participation, and it's an equally important form of participation at parkrun, and it's an equally form of participation at all sport. And I often get asked by other sporting administrators and so on, you know, what's the secret with volunteering? How do you get your volunteers and so on? And, you know, volunteering should be as presented as fun and as beneficial and as social. It should be presented that way to everyone, and not just as this onerous, someone's got to do it kind of job. And so I'll you know, say to someone in a sport, I'll say, well, you know, are the volunteering roles that you're trying to fill? I mean, tell me about them. And they describe these things that sound terrible. And I said, well, you can't, you need to re-engineer that role. I mean, that needs to be fun, and it needs to be rewarding, and it needs to ideally teach something. You need to ideally learn skills when you do it for the first time. And it can be as simple as having a volunteer role where formerly there was just one person in that role. Have two people, because then all of a sudden you've got an opportunity for those two people to become friends and engage and enjoy each other's company throughout the life of whatever that volunteering role might be. It might be an hour, it might be a whole day. And so, you know, looking at, you know, I guess how organisations present volunteering to the community, how they structure the roles themselves to make them enjoyable and rewarding, and ensuring that volunteering is not seen as this necessary evil. It should be seen as something that is rewarding. And, you know, it's the old phrase, I give up my time. Well, you shouldn't have to give up your time. Volunteering shouldn't be about, I'm going to give. It should be, I really want to volunteer because it's fun and rewarding, and I'm actually going to gain. It's a gaining activity, not a giving activity. And I think if we can reposition that is what volunteering means, and not just at parkrun, if you volunteer at the local charity store, or you volunteer at the school, or whatever it might be, you know, volunteering should be not about you giving, it should be about what can you gain that's going to make you a better person and make you enjoy it. So yeah, we've been really big on that for a number of years now. It's almost like the cornerstone of how we communicate when we talk about volunteering and participation. And yeah, for people watching, if there's one take home you're going to get from anything I say today, it's just reconsider how you position volunteering in your community.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic call out for us all, Tim. And I think, you know, I love the point about everyone's a participant. And I think, you know, in events, providing events where you all have a lot of ownership as deliverers of those experiences. And I think that's what makes working in events so powerful, really, that we can have a positive influence on our participants and people that are involved, but also that sort of sense of ownership, that endowment effect of contributing and producing something is really cool. And that's what makes it a great industry to work in many respects.
I think, Andrew, just the last thing I'll say on that too, sorry to jump in there, is one of the things I often say to people with their volunteers is do you actually thank them? Do you say thank you to your volunteers at the end of the day, or do they just kind of finish and go home? And so often I see, as soon as I ask that question, I can see in people's heads, they're realizing we don't even say thank you. We don't actually even say to them, thanks for coming along today. It's great. We appreciate it. And, you know, at parkrun, when we have our pre-event welcome, the volunteers all get thanked. They all automatically receive an email after volunteering thanking them. And these are just tiny things. These can be so easily engineered into the culture of your organization or into your digital platform. And most people don't do it. I mean, it's low hanging fruit. But I think, there's just some really easy wins. So if you can change the culture and what volunteering means, and remember some of these tiny little things you can do, it's the pat on the back. That should really enhance volunteering within any business or organisation or event.
Yeah, fantastic, Tim. I think it's a really good point. I think it's another great example of the sort of the real world learnings that parkrun has amassed and is applying. That it's how you make people feel and making that effort, and those last moments can be the most important moments, aren't they? To make sure people want to come back again. So I think it's really powerful, which we can all apply in whatever experiences we're providing. So. Great call out. I'm conscious we're coming towards the end of our hour, so I might do a quick whip around the panel for final thoughts or sort of messages that you think we should all have front of mind as we walk away to deliver our events and experiences, which are starting to re-emerge. So I might come back to you, Steve, first with your parting thoughts.
Yeah, well, I'll try and do this very quickly, Andrew, but we did promise some hot off the press insights. So I just want to share, I'll just share a few, I guess, key data points. We just finished doing some research all about understanding, what is the new normal going to be for sport and major events from a consumer point of view. So yeah, a few of those data points I'll share, some positive, some negative.
Right.
The first one, so 1 in 4 sports fans are saying that they're now going to prioritise replacement activities that they've discovered during COVID over attending live sport again. So, obviously within this data, we can look at who these people are and work out ways to get them back. But that's a concerning insight. Conversely, though, the more positive thing is 1 in 5 sports fans are actually making up for lost time. That's their plan. They want to attend more live sport than they did before. So again, the demographic splits around these data points are obviously crucial, and understanding more about who those people are and how you can talk to them and the messages you need to give to them. And then also we sort of looked at it sport by sport, and there's some big differentials in terms of fans of different sports. So basketball fans, for instance, lead the way. They want to return to live sport more than any other sporting fan base. So some of those sport by sport comparisons are also very interesting. And then finally, probably, I won't go through them because if you want to, you can purchase the report afterwards. But there are 4 really clear drivers that we identified in order to get fans back to live events post-COVID. So that'd obviously be key for any organizer in getting the event right to make sure customers are coming back in the first place, but then also making sure they're right so that when customers are back attending events, that the experience is meeting their expectations so that they continue to come back. So yeah, I think I mentioned that's we've got a standard report, 55-page report on that. That's this is my shameful plug. That's available just for $3,000 at the moment. So yeah, please get in contact with me afterwards if you're interested to know more.
Fantastic, Steve. I think it's now more than ever we need to have some good evidence and some good understanding of our audiences, don't we, in terms of what we need to provide and being able to explore that and understand what the different parts of our audience need and how they're feeling about things and communicate and offer experiences accordingly. So I think it's a good time to be sharing knowledge and insights and data. So thank you for that, and encourage people to get in touch with you. We'll have everyone's contact details available. I'll post this show, as we always do, on LinkedIn and YouTube afterwards. So please contact Steve. And Hans, I'd love to hear your sort of final thoughts or takeaways for us to walk away with today.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And the thought I want to leave you with is one of prospect and hope, I guess, in that I'm an advisory board member of the Dutch Sports Council, and they embarked on a process. This is a ministerial council, basically an advisory council to government and industry about how sport should better connect and engage on creating a national sports events strategy. This was published earlier this year, probably a couple of months before the pandemic hit. And the most recent communication about it is that that national sports event strategy might be even more important now than it was pre-COVID, because there's an anticipation and realization that a platform of major events, sport in particular, is something that can bring communities together in times of distress. And so, if nothing else, the message of hope and anticipation for me is that as soon as we slowly get out of this, and whatever the new normal is, I think major events in general, but sport events in particular, is going to be a massive tool to put society back into shape. And you know, the last bit in that regard is that those communities that have gone back into lockdown, you know, what do I need to say? There's 4 things that you can get out of the house for. Exercise is one of them. Do I need to say more? You know, 1 in 4 things that people are most essentially being told to do is to go out and exercise. So, you know, I think there's a great prospect here for both community-based and major events in the sporting context.
Fantastic, Hans. Yeah, look, I think it's a really good shout out, if you like, for events and the role that events play as a platform within sport and entertainment and other areas. I think, you know, certainly agree that to me, you know, sport is a series of events. It's the showcase of a sport. It's the way people get to interact with that sport. And, you know, I think, you know, we've all sort of talked today about the influence that events can have, and that so many people contribute behind the scenes to make those events happen, and so many people gain from those events. So I think you're right. Large and small events are going to play a huge role in the development of our sports and or whatever genre you're working in the future. So yeah, really, really good point. Thank you. And Tim, I'll come to you for your final thoughts and what we can perhaps walk away with or have front of mind as we re-emerge from the shutdown.
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. Look, Hans stole my line. I was going to say optimism as well. Hope and optimism. And I think throughout all of this kind of lockdown period, we've constantly said to each other within parkrun, but also the way we've communicated with all our parkrunners is by saying we will get through this together. And I think the together part there is so important, in that we, you know, as families, as communities, as countries, where we stick together to get through what is, of course, an unprecedented crisis. But you know, as I said right at the start, there is hope. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and the fact that, you know, parkrun as an example is restarting in New Zealand this weekend that's our example. That's our light. But I think there are lots of examples starting to come through now. So, you know, I think that's it from me. I think it's just everyone, you know, please, you know, support each other, and we look forward to seeing you all back out there at events and playing sport and walking and running and going to libraries and doing all those things. It's going to be great when that all re-emerges.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tim, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. I really appreciate everyone contributing, and certainly thank our panelists. Thank you, Tim, Steve, and Hans. Really value your thoughts and sharing those with us today. So thanks for giving up your time to do so. I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. And just to finish up, we will be back in 3 weeks' time. We're back on July 24 with lining up another really impressive panel. Please, as always, drop us your thoughts around people or topics that you'd like us to focus on. We're really looking ahead now at what positive things are happening and re-emerging in the industry. Certainly recognising that the challenges and that many people are still going through, but also looking for those beacons of hope, as was, I think Tim called it today. I think it's really good for us to be looking ahead. So if I can help you at all further, please touch base. All these event shows are posted. If you want to share them with someone else or with your team, that'd be fantastic. We've also got the podcast version of the show. It's a really interesting show. I spoke with a guy, Jesse Cole from the Savannah Bananas, and fans first entertainment is his mantra. And he's got a lot of really interesting thinking to share, and I'd encourage people to listen to that podcast. Jump on the website. There's a bunch of free downloads to help you design the experiences, a lot of the things that we've talked about today. So please reach out if I can help. But thanks again for joining. Thank you very much to Hans, Tim, and Steve. Really appreciate your time. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, Andrew.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you. We'll see you all
Bye-bye.
next time.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.